Imagine being curled into a ball, knees pressed against your chest, locked inside a glass sphere barely 4 feet wide, dangling from the belly of a bomber at 25,000 feet. You have no parachute, no room to move, no way out unless someone opens the hatch from the inside. If the plane has to belly land, you're the thing that hits the ground first. This was the reality for thousands of young Americans in World War II, the ball turret gunners of the B-17 Flying Fortress, and it was, without question, the worst job on the plane. The Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress carried a crew of 10 men: pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, flight engineer, radio operator, 2 waist gunners, a tail gunner, and one more, the man underneath it all. Each position was dangerous. 8th Air Force bomber crews suffered staggering losses. Anywhere from 50 to 70% of personnel became killed, wounded, missing, or captured over the course of the air war in Europe. But among these 10 men, there was one position that stood apart. Not necessarily because of the highest body count, the statistics are actually debated, but because of the sheer psychological horror of the job: the ball turret gunner. The Sperry ball turret was an engineering marvel and a human nightmare. A plexiglass and metal sphere, roughly 4 feet in diameter, bolted to the underside of the B-17. Inside, 2 Browning 50 caliber machine guns, a K4 computing gun sight suspended between the gunner's legs, about 1,000 rounds of ammunition, and 1 man. To get in, the gunner would open a hatch on the floor of the fuselage, rotate the turret so the guns pointed straight down, then lower himself into the fetal position, back curved, knees drawn up to his ears, feet resting on pedals. One pedal controlled the gun sight. The other operated his intercom, the only connection he had to the 9 men above him. Then the hatch would close, and he was alone. There's a common myth that only the smallest men were assigned to the ball turret. While shorter airmen were preferred, it wasn't a hard rule. There are records of gunners standing 6'1" who squeezed into that sphere mission after mission. Now picture yourself inside. You're at 25,000 feet. The temperature outside is minus 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Your electrically heated flight suit is the only thing between you and frostbite, and those suits failed constantly. Veterans recalled missions where the heating cut out and their fingers went numb on the joysticks within minutes. Some tenders had to be physically pulled from the turret after long missions because their limbs had partially frozen. Oxygen was another killer. Each gunner had a personal oxygen supply. If the line was hit by flak or simply malfunctioned, you'd lose consciousness without warning. The only way your crew would know something was wrong was if they noticed the turret had stopped moving, and with 10 men fighting for their lives against enemy fighters, that might not happen quickly. But here's what every ball turret gunner remembered most: the view. You could see everything: the patchwork of German farmland 5 miles below, the black flowers of flak bursting around you, other B-17s in formation, and the ones that weren't in formation anymore, burning, spiraling, breaking apart. A waist gunner might see a plane go down and lose sight of it. The ball turret gunner watched it all the way to the ground. And there was one more thing you could see from the ball turret that nobody else could: your own engines. Ball turret gunners were usually the first to spot an engine fire or oil leak. They'd call it up on the intercom, sometimes delivering the news that would decide whether the crew lived or died. Most ball turret gunners did not wear a parachute. There simply wasn't room. The chute was stored inside the fuselage, just above the hatch. If the order came to bail out, the gunner had to rotate the turret to the entry position, open the hatch, haul himself up into the fuselage, grab his parachute, strap it on, and jump, all while the aircraft was potentially on fire, in a spin, or breaking apart. He was always the last man out, if he got out at all. But the scenario that haunted every ball turret gunner, the one they whispered about but rarely spoke of openly, was the belly landing. If a B-17 lost its landing gear, the crew had to land on the aircraft's belly. The turret could be retracted into the fuselage using an electro-hydraulic system or cranked up manually by the waist gunners. But if the system was damaged, if power was lost, if the manual crank was jammed, if there simply wasn't enough time, the ball turret gunner was still underneath, and the runway was coming up fast. The journalist Andy Rooney, who flew with 8th Air Force bomber crews, recounted the story of a B-17 forced to make a wheels-up landing with the ball turret jammed in the down position. The crew could not get their gunner out. They made the landing anyway, because they had no other choice. Not every source confirms every version of these stories. Some historians argue there's limited documented evidence of gunners being crushed in belly landings. But what is documented, what veterans confirmed again and again, is that this fear was constant. It was the thing that kept ball turret gunners awake at night. The knowledge that one piece of shrapnel hitting the wrong hydraulic line could make their coffin out of their combat station.
Here's where it gets interesting, and where many documentaries get it wrong. A casualty survey from the 95th Bomb Group of the 8th Air Force recorded 1,117 battle casualties on B-17s. The breakdown by position tells a surprising story. Waist gunners suffered the highest raw casualties, around 24% of all killed and wounded. But there were 2 waist gunners per plane, so the individual risk was roughly halved. The bombardier and navigator, exposed in the plexiglass nose, were also highly vulnerable, together accounting for a significant share of losses. The ball turret? According to this data, it had one of the lowest fatality rates of any gunner position, roughly 7% of personnel casualties. So was the ball turret actually the safest spot? Not exactly. The small profile of the curled-up gunner made him a harder target than the exposed waist gunners, but the statistics don't capture the full picture. The oxygen failures, the frozen limbs, the psychological toll of isolation, and the ever-present belly landing nightmare. The worst job isn't always the one with the highest body count. Sometimes it's the one that breaks you in ways the numbers can't measure. Thousands of young men, many of them teenagers, climbed into that 4-foot sphere, day after day, mission after mission. They couldn't see their crewmates, they couldn't move, they couldn't escape without help, and they did it anyway. The poet Randall Jarrell, who served in the Army Air Forces, wrote just 5 lines about the ball turret gunner. The last line reads, "When I died, they washed me out of the turret with a hose." 5 lines. That was enough. If this story moved you, subscribe to War Real History. We bring World War II to life, not with Hollywood drama, but with the real stories of the men who lived it. I'll see you in the next one.